No one wanted to buy her, abandoned without clothes in a western market, until a rancher saw her. The morning sun rose slowly over the small western town, casting long shadows across the dusty streets. The market was coming alive with activity. Traders shouting out their goods, horses whinnying, carts creaking as they rolled over uneven stones, and townspeople hurrying about, looking for bargains or simply trying to pass the time. There was the smell of fresh bread from the baker's stall, mixed with the earthy scent of animals, hay, and dust that never seemed to leave the town no matter how often it rained. Amid all this bustling life, there was a small figure sitting on the edge of the marketplace. She was barely 10 years old, though no one had bothered to ask her age. She sat with her knees pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped around them tightly as if they could protect her from the world. Her hair was tangled and dusty, falling into her eyes in messy strands. Her skin, lightly sunburned from days spent outdoors, looked pale and fragile against the harsh sun. She had no shoes, and her bare feet were covered in the fine dust of the town square. Worst of all, she had no clothes beyond a ragged, soiled cloth loosely draped around her, which did little to protect her from the chill of the morning or the stares of the crowd. No one knew who she was. No one seemed to care. Traders kept setting up their stalls, shouting louder than the others to attract customers, while families passed her by, clutching their children's hands and whispering to each other about the poor little girl. The whispers were quick and cautious, almost as if speaking too loudly would make them responsible for her. Some wondered if she had been abandoned by her parents, while others guessed she might have wandered away from a nearby homestead. But no one had approached her. No one had offered even a word of comfort. The girl stayed silent, her wide eyes darting around the marketplace. Every now and then she would look up hopefully when someone approached, only to see them glance away or shake their heads and hurry past. She had learned quickly that the world could be cruel, even when people smiled at each other or greeted one another politely. People often pretended to ignore things they did not want to deal with, and she had become an invisible part of the market scene. She shifted slightly, trying to get comfortable on the hard wooden edge of the stall platform where she had taken her place. The boards were rough against her skin, scratching her arms and legs, but it was better than sitting directly on the dusty ground. Her stomach growled softly. She had eaten nothing since the previous evening, only sipping a little water from a puddle she had found near the fountain in the center of town. Hunger gnawed at her, but it was the loneliness that hurt more. She had no one to talk to, no one to explain why she was there, or why the world seemed so unkind. Around her, the market was a whirl of activity. A butcher waved a cleaver, showing off the fresh cuts of meat hanging from hooks. A woman with a bright red shawl called out to passers-by, offering apples that shone in the sunlight, their sweet smell drifting through the air. Children ran past her, chasing one another and laughing freely, their laughter cutting sharply through the silence that seemed to cling to her. Draven Gulain kneels on the execution stand with his head, from man to death, wishing she could be part of their games, wishing she could laugh without fear, without shame.
Yet, as she watched, a few of the townspeople shook their heads.
Some muttered about how strange it was for a child to be left alone in such a place. Others were more judgmental, saying it was likely the girl had done something wrong to be abandoned. The girl heard none of these words directly, but she felt them in the cold looks and the way people avoided her. She knew they were talking about her. It was a familiar feeling, one that had followed her for as long as she could remember, being invisible, being unwanted, being a burden. Hours passed slowly. The sun climbed higher in the sky, making the market even hotter, and the dust rose in tiny clouds with every footstep. The girl did not move from her spot. She had nowhere to go, no family to turn to, no shelter to run to if the sun grew too harsh. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to imagine a place where she could be safe, where she could rest without fear, where someone would care if she cried. In her mind, she pictured a small house with a warm fire, soft blankets, and a kind face smiling down at her. But opening her eyes brought her back to reality. The harsh sun, the rough boards, and the constant flow of people who did not see her. At one point, a merchant with a cart full of fresh vegetables stopped near her. He leaned down and asked sharply, "Hey kid, what are you doing here all alone?" The girl did not answer. She had learned long ago that words were not always safe. Sometimes talking only brought anger or rejection. The merchant frowned, muttered something under his breath and walked away, leaving her alone once again. By midday, she was exhausted. Her small body ached from sitting still for so long, from hunger, and from the constant tension of being watched yet ignored. She had no one to call, no place to hide, no comfort in the chaos around her. Yet, she did not cry, not yet. She had learned that crying often made people turn away faster, as if her tears were a burden they could not carry. Instead, she stayed still, small and quiet, observing the market with careful eyes. Every movement, every sound was a signal. A shadow across the ground, the clatter of a cart, the rustle of fabric from a passing dress. She studied the people, learning how to avoid trouble and how to stay unnoticed. Even as she sat there, she did not give up hope entirely. Somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of hope flickered, a hope that someone would notice her, that someone would see beyond her ragged clothes and dusty appearance and understand that she was just a child who wanted to be safe and loved. It was this hope that kept her upright, that made her wipe the dust from her hands and sit up a little straighter whenever someone came near. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, the shadows lengthened, and the market started to thin. Some of the traders began packing up their goods, while families hurried home for dinner. The girl remained where she was, tired, hungry, and aching, yet still watching, still waiting. She did not know what she was waiting for, only that she could not move yet, could not give up. There was a feeling, deep and strange, that something might change, that her story was not yet over, that maybe, just maybe, someone would come and see her not as a burden, but as a child who deserved care, warmth, and kindness. And so she sat, silent among the noise, invisible among the crowd, but alive with a quiet, stubborn hope that the world might not be entirely cruel. The afternoon sun hung high in the sky, its heat pressing down on the town and making the dust shimmer in waves. The small girl had been in the market for hours now, still sitting on the rough wooden platform, her bare feet covered in the fine layer of sand and dirt that seemed to cling no matter how she wiped. Her stomach ached with hunger, sharp and gnawing, reminding her constantly that she had not eaten anything since the previous evening. She tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the rhythm of the market, the clatter of carts, the shouts of merchants, the laughter of children. But it was impossible. Hunger was relentless. She watched as people moved past her, some noticing her presence but pretending not to see. Mothers tugged their children away, whispering hurried explanations about why she was alone, while others shook their heads as if her mere existence was a burden. The girl's eyes followed them, a mixture of fear, sadness, and a quiet longing reflected in her gaze. She wanted to call out, to ask for help, to ask just one person to care. But every time she opened her mouth, the words caught in her throat. She had learned long ago that asking too loudly often made people angry or caused them to walk away faster. It was safer to be silent, to shrink into herself and hope that someone kind might notice. By mid-afternoon, the market had grown louder and more chaotic. Traders were shouting even more urgently now, trying to make the last sales of the day. The smell of roasted meat mingled with the sweet scent of apples and fresh bread, making her stomach ache even more. She watched a group of children run past her, chasing one another with wild laughter that made her chest tighten with longing. She remembered the time she had played with other children before she was abandoned, days filled with running, laughing, and carefree joy. But now those memories felt distant, like they belonged to someone else entirely. A few people glanced at her, some with pity, some with annoyance. A baker offered a crust of bread, but then quickly turned away when a customer called him. A woman with a basket of colorful ribbons muttered something about another abandoned child and hurried off. It felt as if the world had decided that she did not belong anywhere, that she was invisible, unwanted, and perhaps even a mistake. The girl hugged her knees tighter, trying to hold herself together as a tear slipped down her dusty cheek. She wiped it away quickly, not wanting anyone to see her cry. But the sorrow clung stubbornly, heavier than the dust on her skin. She tried to stand once, stretching her small legs, hoping that perhaps she could find someone to help her. She moved slowly through the marketplace, holding on to the edge of stalls for support. The heat of the day made her dizzy, and the hunger made her weak. Every step felt like a battle, and every glance from a passerby felt like a reminder that no one wanted her. Mothers with well-dressed children whispered to each other. Traders shook their heads in disapproval, and even other children avoided her, perhaps sensing the sadness and fear that clung to her like a shadow. As the hours dragged on, despair began to settle over her like a heavy blanket. She found a corner near a quiet stall and sat down again, her small frame curled up against the wooden boards. She imagined what it would feel like to have a home, a warm bed, food to eat, and someone who would look at her and smile without judgment. But as quickly as the images came, they vanished into the harsh reality of the bustling market. She was alone, and it seemed that no one would notice her need for help. She thought of her family, of the people who had left her behind. She did not understand why they had abandoned her. Had she done something wrong? Was she not good enough? These thoughts twisted inside her like tiny thorns, making her feel even smaller and more fragile. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long orange shadows across the market, the girl's energy waned. She had been moving and watching all day, trying desperately to find someone who might help, someone who might care. But the reality was grim. People did not stop. People did not ask. The world continued on without her, and she felt herself sinking into a deep, quiet despair. The hunger in her stomach was almost unbearable now, and her small frame shook with weakness. She leaned her head against the wooden stall, closing her eyes briefly to escape the noise, the dust, and the endless parade of indifferent faces. A few more children ran past her, still laughing and playing, and she felt an ache deep in her chest. She wanted to join them, wanted to be a part of something joyful again, but the shame of her tattered clothes and bare feet held her back. She remembered being teased once by other children when she had tried to play. They had laughed at her, called her names, and told her she did not belong. That memory stung even more than the hunger or the heat. She pressed her arms tightly against herself, wishing she could disappear, wishing she could vanish into the shadows where no one could see her. Hours turned into late afternoon, and the market began to quiet down. Traders started packing their goods. Carts creaked as they were loaded, and the once bustling market seemed to shrink. The girl stayed in her corner, too weak to move, her hope dwindling with each passing minute. She watched as people hurried home, carrying baskets of food, children in their arms, laughter and conversation filling the air. She felt like an invisible ghost, a shadow that had no place in this lively, noisy world. The wind picked up slightly, stirring the dust and making her shiver. Her tattered cloth did little to keep her warm as the sun dipped lower behind the distant hills. She hugged herself tightly, trying to hold on to what little strength she had left. Tears came again, quietly this time, rolling down her cheeks without sound. She felt utterly alone, abandoned not just by her family but by the entire town, by every person who had walked past her without a glance. And yet, deep inside there was a tiny spark, a spark that refused to be snuffed out completely. Even in the face of so much rejection, she still hoped. She still believed that someone, somewhere, might notice her, might care, might reach out a hand and show her kindness. That thought alone kept her upright, kept her from curling up completely and giving in to despair. She had learned to survive by staying silent, by observing, by moving slowly and cautiously, and by keeping that small spark of hope alive, even when it seemed impossible. Night approached, and the market emptied further. The shadows grew long and the air turned cooler, brushing against her bare skin with a chill. She huddled closer to the wooden boards, exhausted from the day's struggle, the hunger, and the emotional weight of rejection. Yet even in that moment of near hopelessness, she did not give up entirely. Somewhere in the quiet corners of her heart, she clung to the idea that things might change, that maybe tomorrow someone would see her not as a problem or a burden, but as a child who deserved care, warmth, and safety. As the stars began to appear faintly in the sky above the western town, the girl finally allowed herself a small moment of rest. She leaned her head against her knees, trying to sleep in the noisy emptiness of the marketplace. Her small body shook from hunger and cold, but her mind held on to the fragile hope that tomorrow might bring something different. Somewhere, Someone might finally notice her. Someone might finally care. And that tiny thought, though weak and fragile, was enough to keep her heart beating, enough to make her endure just one more day in a world that had so far been unkind. The following morning, the market slowly stirred back to life. The sun rose pale and golden, casting a soft glow over the town and lighting the dusty streets. The air carried the smells of fresh bread baking, hay in the nearby stables, and the earthy scent of the soil warmed by the sun. The small girl, though exhausted from the previous day, had managed to stay in the market overnight. She had curled herself under a wooden stall for some protection, trying to keep warm and avoid being seen. Her ragged cloth offered almost no comfort, but it was better than nothing. Hunger still gnawed at her stomach, and her bare feet hurt with every movement. Yet she remained seated, waiting silently, observing the awakening town. People started arriving carrying baskets, leading horses, and calling out greetings to one another. The girl watched from the corner of her eye, still invisible to most, still silent. She had become an expert at fading into the background, at moving just enough to survive without attracting attention. She noticed traders setting up their stalls, shouting loudly to attract customers, and children running past, laughing as they chased one another. Her heart ached to be part of it, to feel included, but she remained small and still, unsure if anyone would ever look at her kindly. As the morning went on, a figure appeared at the edge of the market that caught her attention. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and walked with a slow, confident stride. There was a calmness about him, something different from the usual hurried townspeople or the loud traders. He wore simple, sturdy clothes and carried the faint smell of leather and horses, a scent that made the girl curious. Unlike others, he did not rush past without noticing her. His eyes scanned the market with a careful gaze, and then they settled on her. The girl instinctively drew back, shrinking smaller against the wooden boards. She had learned to fear attention. Sometimes even kind faces could turn away when confronted with a child who seemed so alone and vulnerable. But something in the rancher's eyes was different. There was no judgment, no harshness, only a quiet understanding and concern that made her pause. He knelt down a short distance from her, careful not to startle her, and spoke in a soft voice. "Hello there, little one. Are you all right?" The girl blinked, unsure how to respond. Her throat felt tight, words lodged somewhere she could not reach. She shook her head slightly, a small gesture that spoke more than words ever could. The rancher did not move closer, did not push her to speak. He simply sat quietly, his presence calm and unthreatening. He glanced around the marketplace briefly, as if checking that it was safe, and then returned his gaze to her. "It's all right," he said gently. "You don't have to be afraid. I won't hurt you." Something about his tone, the patience in his voice, made the girl's heart beat a little faster. It was the first voice she had heard in a long time that felt truly kind. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she raised her head to look at him. His face was strong but gentle, his eyes warm, and she felt, for the first time in many days, that maybe, just maybe, someone could care. Her tiny hands clutched her knees, and she rocked slightly back and forth, unsure if she should trust him. She wanted to believe him, but fear was still strong, and she had been let down before. The rancher noticed her hesitation and smiled softly. He reached into his coat and pulled out a piece of cloth, clean and folded neatly. "Here," he said. "This will help you stay warm. You've been out here a long time." He laid the cloth gently on the boards beside her. It was not a demand, not a command, but an offer. The girl looked at it, then back at him, unsure. Slowly she extended her hand and took the cloth, feeling the smooth fabric against her fingers. She wrapped it around herself carefully, feeling warmth seep into her small, cold body. It was a small comfort, but it made a world of difference. For the next few minutes they sat in silence. The market bustled around them, but in that quiet corner, it felt almost like the world had paused. The girl observed the rancher closely. He did not rush her, did not ask too many questions, and did not show impatience. He simply waited, giving her the time she needed to feel safe. That simple act of patience was a kindness she had almost forgotten existed. Her lips trembled slightly as she realized she could breathe without fear for a few precious moments. Finally, the rancher spoke again, his voice calm and reassuring. "What's your name, little one?" The girl hesitated, her small shoulders tensing. She had not spoken to anyone in so long, had not trusted anyone to hear her truth. Slowly she whispered, I don't have one." Her voice was barely audible, almost lost in the market's noise, but the rancher leaned closer, listening carefully. "That's all right," he said gently. "We can fix that. But more importantly, you need a place to rest and something to eat. You've been here all alone, haven't you?" The girl nodded, her eyes filling with tears, but this time they were not only of sadness, they carried a glimmer of hope. Someone had noticed her, someone had spoken to her kindly, and someone had offered help without judgment. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten existed. The rancher rose to his feet slowly, offering his hand. "Come with me," he said softly. "I have a ranch just outside of town. You can rest there, and we'll figure out the rest later. You don't have to stay here anymore." The girl hesitated, fear still gripping her, but the kindness in his eyes and the patience in his voice slowly eased her doubts. She placed her small hand tentatively in his larger one, feeling the rough but gentle strength of his grip. As they walked through the town, people paused to watch. Some whispered among themselves, curious about the girl and the man who had taken interest in her. Others shook their heads, disbelieving that someone would truly care for a child abandoned in the marketplace. But the girl did not notice them. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of safety and direction. Her steps, though hesitant, were guided by the knowledge that she was not entirely alone anymore. The rancher led her to his cart, hitched to a sturdy horse. He helped her climb in, offering her a seat on a soft blanket he had spread in the back. She sank into it, feeling the warmth and comfort of something clean and safe. As the cart began to move, jolting slightly over the rough road, she looked out at the town disappearing behind them. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement, but more than anything she felt hope. The hope that someone could care for her, that kindness could exist even in a harsh world. The journey to the ranch was quiet at first. The girl watched the landscape change as they moved further from town, the dust of the streets giving way to green fields and rolling hills. She saw animals grazing peacefully, the sun glinting off the leather saddles and the gentle sway of trees in the wind. The air smelled different here, fresh and clean, not the mix of dust and smoke from the town. The girl took a deep breath, letting the new smells fill her senses, feeling, for the first time in days, that the world could be a place of beauty and calm. Finally, they arrived at the ranch. The rancher led her inside, showing her a small room with a clean bed, soft blankets, and a window that looked out over the fields.
"This will be your space for now," he said kindly.
"You can rest here, and we'll make sure you're fed. You've been through a lot, and you deserve some peace." The girl's eyes widened as she looked around. Everything was so different from the rough streets and dusty market. The room was safe, warm, and quiet, a place where she could begin to heal. As she sat on the edge of the bed, the rancher placed a bowl of warm porridge in front of her. The smell made her stomach rumble, and she hesitated for only a moment before taking a careful bite. The warmth and flavor filled her, and for the first time in days, she ate without fear, without shame, without worry. She looked up at the rancher, who smiled gently at her. "Eat slowly," he said softly. "There's plenty, and you don't have to rush." She nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude she could not yet put into words. By the end of the meal, the girl felt a little stronger. Her stomach was no longer empty, and her body felt warmer and safer. She realized that the kindness of this one man, the rancher, had changed everything. She had gone from feeling invisible and unwanted to being seen, cared for, and protected. It was a small step, but it was the beginning of something entirely new. A life where she could feel hope again, where she could learn to trust, and where she could believe that the world could hold goodness. As the sun began to set over the ranch, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, the girl finally allowed herself to relax fully. She lay on the soft blankets, her heart still beating with a mix of nervousness and relief. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while she felt a spark of hope. Someone had noticed her. Someone had chosen to care, and for the first time in many days she felt that maybe, just maybe, she had a place in this world after all. The girl woke early the next morning, sunlight streaming gently through the window of the small room at the ranch. She stretched her arms slowly, feeling the warmth of the blankets around her and the softness of the bed beneath her. For the first time in many days she did not wake to the sound of a bustling market or the fear of being alone. Instead, she heard the quiet sounds of the ranch waking up, horses neighing softly in their stables, the rustle of leaves in the morning breeze, and the distant clatter of someone tending to chores. It was calm, and for the first time in a long time she felt safe. She rubbed her eyes and glanced around the room, noticing the small details she had not paid attention to the night before. A clean basin of water sat on a wooden table, a soft rug lay across the floor, and a small chair was tucked neatly into the corner. Everything felt new and welcoming, and her heart swelled with a strange mixture of gratitude and wonder. She had never had a space of her own before, and it was hard to believe that someone had given it to her simply because they cared. Soon, the rancher appeared at the door carrying a tray with a simple breakfast, warm porridge, fresh bread, and a cup of milk. He smiled gently as he set the tray down on the table. "Good morning," he said softly. "I hope you slept well. Today, we'll make sure you're ready for the day, and you can meet the rest of the ranch." The girl nodded shyly, unsure of how to respond. Words felt awkward on her tongue after so many days of silence, so she simply sat at the edge of the bed and waited as he set the food before her. The rancher gave her space, speaking calmly and kindly without rushing her, and she felt a warmth in her chest she had almost forgotten existed. It was strange, this feeling of being treated with patience and respect, and she savored it quietly as she began to eat. As she ate, the rancher told her about the ranch. He explained that it was a place where animals were cared for, crops were grown, and everyone worked together to help one another. He spoke of the horses that roamed the fields, the chickens that laid eggs in the morning, and the cows that needed tending each day. The girl listened intently, fascinated by this world that seemed so different from the dusty streets and crowded markets of the town. For the first time, she felt that she could belong somewhere, that she could be part of something larger than herself. After breakfast, the rancher offered to show her around. He hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to leave the safety of her room, but the rancher's gentle encouragement and kind smile gave her courage. She took a deep breath, wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, and stepped outside. The fresh morning air was cool and smelled of grass, flowers, and earth. Birds chirped in the trees, and the soft rustling of the leaves made the world feel alive and welcoming. She felt a sense of wonder she had not experienced in a long time, a feeling that maybe life could be beautiful again. As they walked through the ranch, the girl's eyes widened at the sight of animals she had only seen from afar in the town. Horses grazed peacefully in the fields, their tails swishing lazily. Cows mooed softly as they moved toward the barn, and chickens clucked busily, pecking at the ground. She reached out tentatively to touch the soft fur of a calf, feeling a connection she had longed for but never thought she would find. The rancher watched her closely, giving her space to explore while remaining nearby to offer reassurance if she needed it. The girl quickly realized that this place was different from the world she had known. There were no harsh words, no judgment, no rushing crowds pushing her aside. Here, everything moved at its own pace, and people treated one another with respect and kindness. The rancher introduced her to the other workers and his family, who welcomed her with smiles and gentle words. They offered her clean clothes, a warm meal, and the freedom to rest or play as she wished. For the first time in many days, she felt a sense of belonging. Over the next few hours, she explored the ranch more fully. She learned to feed the chickens, helped gather fresh eggs, and watched the horses being brushed and saddled. The rancher patiently taught her how to approach the animals gently, how to speak softly, and how to care for them without fear. With each task, the girl grew more confident. She realized that she had skills she could offer, that she could contribute, and that she was valued for who she was. It was a feeling that made her heart swell with pride and gratitude. As the day went on, the rancher took her to the fields where crops were growing. He showed her how to water the plants, how to check for weeds, and how to care for the land so that it would produce food for everyone. The girl worked alongside him, feeling the soil in her hands, the sun on her face, and the gentle breeze at her back. She realized that she had never felt this connected to the world before, and it filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known. By late afternoon, the girl was tired but happy. She had learned so much in just one day, and for the first time, she felt that her life was moving in a positive direction. The rancher led her back to the small room she now called her own.
"You've done very well today," he said kindly.
"I'm proud of you." The girl smiled shyly, feeling a warmth in her chest she had almost forgotten existed. Praise and encouragement were new to her, and it made her feel strong and capable. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the girl sat by the window looking out over the fields. The animals settled in for the night, the wind rustled through the trees, and the world felt calm and safe. She realized that she had begun to trust again, that the world could hold kindness, and that she had finally found a place where she could belong. The rancher brought her a simple dinner, and they ate together, talking softly about the day and the animals she had cared for. It was a normal evening, ordinary in every way, yet extraordinary to her because it was filled with warmth, care, and a sense of home. As night fell and the stars appeared in the sky, the girl lay in her soft bed, thinking about the day. She thought about the market, the crowded streets, and the long hours of fear and loneliness she had endured. She realized that all of that hardship had led her to this moment, to a place where she was safe, cared for, and valued. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel hope for the future. She drifted off to sleep, her heart light with the knowledge that she had found a home, and that her story was finally beginning to change for the better. The following days were filled with learning, growth, and discovery. The girl became more comfortable in her new life, helping with chores, caring for the animals, and even learning to ride one of the horses under the rancher's careful guidance. She began to enjoy simple pleasures she had never experienced before, watching the sun rise over the hills, feeling the soft fur of a horse, laughing with children from nearby families who visited the ranch. Each day brought new lessons and small victories, and she grew stronger, both physically and emotionally. The rancher continued to offer guidance and support, never pushing her too fast, always allowing her to progress at her own pace. He encouraged her to ask questions, explore her surroundings, and discover her own strengths. Slowly but surely, the girl's confidence grew. She began to smile more often, to speak up, and to believe in herself. The once frightened child who had sat alone in the market now stood tall, proud of her accomplishments and filled with a sense of purpose. She also began to share small parts of her story with the rancher, telling him about the market, the long days of hunger, and the loneliness she had endured. He listened patiently, never interrupting or judging, and offered comfort and reassurance when her memories became too painful. Sharing her experiences helped her to heal, and she realized that she was not alone in her journey. Someone cared deeply about her. Someone had chosen to help her, and that knowledge gave her strength to face each day with courage and determination. By the end of the first week, the girl had begun to feel truly at home. The ranch was no longer just a place of safety. It was a place where she belonged, a place where she could grow, learn, and thrive. She had discovered that life could be kind, that people could be trustworthy, and that even after great hardship, there could be joy and hope. For the first time in a long time, she dreamed about the future, imagining the possibilities that lay ahead, knowing that she had the support and guidance of the rancher and his family to help her achieve them. And so, each day at the ranch became a new beginning. The girl learned that the world, though often harsh and unforgiving, could also be full of kindness, warmth, and opportunities for growth. She discovered the value of patience, the importance of care, and the transformative power of love and trust. Most importantly, she learned that she mattered, that she had a place in this world, and that her life could be filled with hope, joy, and purpose. The days at the ranch passed quickly, Yet each one seemed filled with new experiences and small victories that brought the girl closer to a sense of belonging she had never known before. She woke each morning to the gentle sunlight spilling into her small room and the sounds of the ranch stirring to life. Horses nickering, cows mooing softly, and the rhythmic creak of the windmill became familiar companions. The air smelled of fresh grass, earth, and hay, a scent that made her feel alive in a way the dusty streets of the town had never done. She no longer felt invisible or unwanted. Every day she discovered something new about herself, and every day she felt stronger and braver than the day before. The rancher was patient and kind, guiding her through her tasks without ever rushing her or making her feel inadequate. At first, the simplest chores had seemed daunting. Feeding the chickens, gathering eggs, or helping carry water from the well had felt unfamiliar and difficult. But slowly she grew confident. Her hands learned to work with care, her movements became steadier, and her fear of failure faded with every task completed. She took pride in each small success, from brushing a horse's mane to filling the feeding trough with grain, and the sense of accomplishment filled her heart with warmth and hope. Beyond chores, the rancher encouraged her to learn about the land itself. He taught her how to plant seeds, water crops, and understand the cycles of growth. She watched tiny seedlings sprout from the soil and marveled at how something so small could become something strong and thriving with patience and care. It reminded her of herself, the way she had been abandoned and left alone. Yet with care, kindness, and support, she could grow too. She began to see herself as someone capable, someone who could survive hardship and still flourish. The rancher's family welcomed her as one of their own. They included her in meals, conversations, and simple moments of laughter around the hearth in the evenings. She learned to enjoy small pleasures that had once been foreign to her. Warm meals eaten with friends, soft blankets at night, the gentle glow of a lantern on a quiet evening. For the first time, she felt the joy of being part of a family, of being accepted without conditions or judgment. Her smile, once shy and hesitant, began to shine more often, and the sparkle in her eyes reflected a growing confidence and sense of belonging. Children from nearby families occasionally came to visit the ranch. At first, she watched them from a distance, afraid of their judgment or rejection. But the kindness and encouragement of the rancher gave her courage. Slowly, she began to play alongside them, laughing, running, and learning games she had forgotten. Her laughter, once silenced by fear and loneliness, rang freely through the fields, and the joy of companionship warmed her heart in ways she had never experienced before. She realized that friendship was not something to fear, it was something to embrace, and she began to open herself to the connections she had once thought impossible.
Her education also began under the gentle guidance of the rancher.
He taught her to read and write, starting with the basics and gradually helping her build confidence in her abilities. She discovered a love for stories, for the way words could create entire worlds in her mind, and for the power of expressing her thoughts and dreams on paper. Learning became an adventure rather than a chore, and she found joy in seeing her progress. With every new word she read and every sentence she wrote, she felt stronger, more capable, and more certain that she had a place in the world. One day, as she helped the rancher mend a fence near the edge of the property, she paused and looked out over the fields stretching toward the distant hills. The sun was warm on her face, the breeze carried the scent of flowers and earth, and the animals grazed peacefully nearby. She realized how far she had come from the dusty market streets where she had once felt invisible and unwanted. Her heart swelled with gratitude and wonder. She had been abandoned, left alone and afraid, but now she had found safety, love, and purpose. She felt a deep connection to this land and the people who had chosen to care for her, and in that moment she understood the true meaning of belonging. The rancher noticed her quiet reflection and smiled. "You've grown a lot," he said softly, "not just in strength, but in heart. You've shown courage, patience, and kindness, and that makes all the difference." The girl looked up at him, her eyes bright, and nodded. She realized that his words were more than praise. They were a reminder that she mattered, that her efforts and growth were seen and valued. For the first time, she truly believed in her own worth. Over the months, the girl became an integral part of the ranch. She learned to care for the animals independently, to manage small tasks around the property, and even to teach younger children some of the skills she had learned. She became known for her gentle approach with the animals, her careful attention to details, and her ability to comfort others when they were scared or uncertain. The rancher's encouragement had helped her discover her natural empathy and leadership, and she began to understand that she could make a difference, not just in her own life, but in the lives of others around her. The townspeople who had once ignored her or looked down upon her began to notice the transformation. Some came to visit the ranch, curious about the girl who had been abandoned and had now become confident, capable, and full of life. They watched as she tended the animals, helped with the crops, and interacted with visitors with grace and kindness. Their whispers, once of doubt and judgment, now turned to admiration. The girl realized that while their opinions had once mattered greatly, she no longer needed their approval to feel worthy. She had found a family and a home that truly valued her, and that was more important than anything else. As she continued to grow, the girl's confidence blossomed in ways she had never imagined. She learned to ride horses across the open fields, her laughter ringing out as the wind rushed past her face. She became skilled in caring for the animals, knowing their habits and needs, and she began to teach others, sharing the knowledge she had gained. The rancher's lessons extended beyond chores and skills. He taught her about courage, resilience, and the importance of kindness. These lessons became part of her character, shaping her into a compassionate, strong, and thoughtful young person. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of orange and purple, the girl sat with the rancher on the porch of the main house. The air was calm, filled with the soft sounds of nature, and the warmth of the day lingered gently. She reflected on her journey, from being abandoned and rejected to being nurtured, loved, and empowered. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the rancher, his family, and the life she had been given. She realized that even in the harshest circumstances, kindness and love could transform a life completely. The rancher looked at her thoughtfully. "You've come a long way," he said. "You've learned, grown, and faced challenges that many would never survive. And yet here you are, stronger, kinder, and full of hope." "That is something to be proud of," the girl smiled, her eyes shining. She felt pride, yes, but also a deep sense of peace. She had endured hardships she had never asked for, but those hardships had led her to this moment, a life filled with purpose, belonging, and love. As the years passed, the girl continued to thrive at the ranch. She grew into a capable young woman, confident in her abilities and compassionate in her interactions with others. She never forgot her early struggles, the fear, hunger, and loneliness, but those memories no longer brought pain. Instead, they reminded her of how far she had come, how resilience and kindness had shaped her journey, and how important it was to extend the same care she had received to others in need. She became a symbol of hope for the community, showing that even the most abandoned and vulnerable could find safety, love, and purpose with patience and kindness. Children looked up to her, learning from her example. The rancher's family continued to support her, proud of the person she had become. And through it all, she never lost sight of the spark of hope that had carried her through the darkest days. The belief that someone could care, that kindness existed, and that life could be full of joy and possibility. By the time she was fully grown, the girl who had once been abandoned in a market without clothes had transformed into a young woman full of life, courage, and compassion. She had found a family who loved her, a home where she belonged, and a world in which she could make a difference. She knew that her past had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. She was free to dream, to hope, and to live fully, carrying the lessons of resilience, patience, and kindness into every part of her life. And so, the girl's journey came full circle. From fear, rejection, and loneliness to safety, love, and purpose, she had endured hardship and found strength in the care of others. She had grown not only in body but in heart and spirit. She had discovered the meaning of belonging, the power of kindness, and the beauty of a life filled with hope. And as she looked out over the fields, the animals grazing peacefully and the sun setting in the sky, she knew that she had truly found her place in the world, a place where she was seen, valued, and loved, now and forever.